Good morning, everybody. Glad to have you here. If you want to follow along, we're going to be back in the book of James, chapter 4, verse 2. Hope you've got a great weekend planned, including being in God's house tomorrow, worshiping with your church family. If you don't have a church family, love to invite you to join us at Poplar Grove Baptist Church. All right, James chapter 4, verse 2. James says, "You lust and have not, you kill and desire to have, and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you have not, because you ask not." As we look at this chapter, James is addressing what causes temptation, what causes us to fall into temptation. We are constantly facing and dealing with temptation. Yesterday he told us, and we looked at the, verse 1, where he tells us lust is the problem, our own desires. Now in verse 2, he tells us that it's simply, yesterday was lust, today it's distrust. Wasn't intending to rhyme, but he says you have not because you ask not. We means very simply that we don't trust God, we don't call on God for our desires, for our needs. We don't call on Him. We don't, as the Bible says, cast our every care on Him. And so, therefore, the things of this world will tempt us. We think we need to do it on our own. We have these man-made desires, these man-made lusts, these selfish desires of our own, and so then anything that stands in our way of getting those things, he says we kill, we fight to get what we think we deserve. One of our most common phrases in our society today is "that's not fair." And so he says we have these desires that we don't trust God for, so therefore we fight, we kill, we murder to get those things. And again, you can see that played out in the evening news in the newspaper every day. People who have these, begins with the lust in verse 1, the desires, and then moves on to, again, to whatever it takes. Again, murder, fighting, whatever it takes, war, to get those things. Don't want to turn completely political here, but I think the events in the last year between Russia and Ukraine in some ways may be an example of that. The Russians have a desire for the land of the Ukraine. And this is a very broad, again, example. You may not completely agree with everything in the politics of it, but again, bear with me. They have a desire for that land. They have a desire to absorb that back into their country. And so what do? They launch a war. They go out, they fight, they kill to take it. Again, huge example. But again, we do the same thing on a smaller scale. Many people have a desire for a companion, for a spouse, for a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, and rather than pray and trust God to bring one into their life, they will go out and try to take somebody else's, and it ends up in a fight, many times in a killing. We see this again. You see this; these two verses played out, unfortunately, on a regular basis. That the desire leads to, rather than trusting God, leads us to fight and war and kill to get what we desire, to get the thing that we are after. And so that's again a very, very powerful verse for us to really look in the mirror and say and ask ourselves: do we trust God, or are we scratching and clawing and fighting? We may not be killing. We may not be literally in the street fighting, but are we trusting God for our needs, our desires, our wants, or are we taking matters into our own hands and therefore falling into temptation? Somebody has a desire, they want a new car, they want a new piece of jewelry. They see an opportunity at work to embezzle, to steal. What happens? Because we have that desire and we don't trust God, we end up falling into temptation. Stern warning, very, very, very powerful warning for us today, that we don't allow our desires to cause us to fail to trust God. Think about it. Have a good day. We'll see you back here Monday morning.